In 2018, a mysterious luxury shoe brand opened a boutique in Los Angeles. The store looked expensive. Everything about it screamed luxury. Influencers, celebrities, and style experts were invited to an exclusive launch event. Within minutes, they were obsessed. People were praising the quality, complimenting the design, and talking about how premium they felt. Then, suddenly, the host revealed the truth. Every single pair of shoe displayed was a pair from Payless. The name of the fake boutique was literally Paylessy. But almost no one could see the darker truth behind it all. While influencers were praising $10 shoes as luxury fashion, Payless itself was collapsing catastrophically. The shoes in Paylessy cost less than $40. They weren't designer, they weren't luxury, they weren't even new. Some of them originally sold for just $10. The entire luxury boutique was completely fake. The brand names were fake, the luxury image was fake, the boutique itself was fake. It was all part of a social experiment and a marketing campaign, and the internet loved it. Millions of people watched influencers accidentally fall in love with $10 shoes, all because they thought they were worth thousands. At its peak, Payless had over 4,500 stores in more than 30 countries. It sold hundreds of millions of shoes every year. For decades, it was the budget footwear shop. And yet, by 2019, the company filed for bankruptcy, announcing it would close all 2,100 remaining stores in the United States. An entire retail empire vanished. But the most shocking part of this story isn't that Payless failed. It's that the viral stunt everyone laughed at accidentally revealed the exact reason the company died. This is the story of how Payless revealed a vital lesson about business. People don't just buy products, they buy perceived value. And Payless accidentally proved it too late to increase their value. To really understand how dramatic the collapse was, you have to understand how massive Payless once was. The company started in 1956 in Topeka, Kansas. Its entire business model was simple: sell shoes cheaper than anyone else. Instead of fancy stores, Payless used a warehouse-style layout. Customers walked down simple aisles. Shoes were stacked in boxes. You grabbed your size yourself. There were no sales assistants, no luxury displays, just cheap shoes. But it worked. By the 1990s, Payless was the largest specialty shoe retailer in the United States. Payless stores appeared in shopping malls, strip malls, suburban plazas, and small towns across America. Their prices were often half the price of competitors. Families loved them because parents could buy shoes for growing kids without spending a fortune. At its peak, Payless was selling over 200 million pairs of shoes a year. For decades, the formula was unbeatable. Cheap shoes sold to constant demand. But hidden inside that model was a problem that would eventually lead to the destruction of the company. Payless had built its entire identity around one concept: cheap. And in retail, cheap is a dangerous brand. Because once customers see you that way, it's almost impossible to change their minds. For years, Payless tried to escape the reputation it had built. Being the cheapest store in the mall works for volume, but it also comes with a brutal downside. Margins are tiny. Competition is everywhere. And worst of all, customers have no loyalty. If another store sold shoes $2 cheaper, people would instantly switch. Meanwhile, the footwear industry was changing. Brands like Nike, Adidas, and Skechers were turning shoes into fashion statements. But Payless had a problem. No one associated them with fashion or style. Payless only meant one thing: budget. Even worse, the rise of fast fashion retailers like H&M and Zara started selling trendy shoes at low prices too. And all of a sudden, Payless wasn't just competing on price. They were competing on style and reputation, and losing both. But despite already struggling, the biggest threat wasn't fashion or competition for better pricing. It was the internet. In the 2000s, a wave of retail bankruptcies hit America. Thousands of physical stores closed. Shopping malls started dying, and companies that depended on physical locations struggled to survive. Payless was one of the most vulnerable companies in this environment, because their entire business depended on their sheer number of stores, thousands of them. Each store had independent overheads, and operating thousands of physical stores suddenly became incredibly expensive. At the same time, online retailers like Amazon were changing how people bought shoes. Online stores had a massive advantage. They didn't need thousands of storefronts. They could sell directly from warehouses, which meant lower prices, better selection, and faster scaling. Payless attempted to adapt. They did launch online shopping and introduce designer collaborations, but it was too little too late. The company already had a deeper structural problem: debt. And they had lots of it. In 2012, Payless was acquired by private equity firms, including Golden Gate Capital and Blum Capital. Private equity deals often follow a specific formula. Buy a company, load it with debt, cut costs, increase profits, then sell it later. Sometimes it works, but sometimes the debt becomes a ticking time bomb. That's exactly what happened to Payless. After the acquisition, the company was suddenly carrying hundreds of millions of dollars in debt. That debt required constant payments, which meant Payless needed strong profits every year just to survive. But the profits were already shrinking. Their sales were declining. Less people were going to the mall. And worst of all, online competition kept growing. The company was trapped. In 2017, Payless filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy for the first time. They closed nearly 400 stores. But the restructuring wasn't enough to save them. The problems were bigger than store closures. The Payless brand itself was fading. And that's when the company launched one of the strangest marketing experiments in retail history, Paylessy. In 2018, Paylessy was born. The name sounded Italian, the logo looked expensive, and they opened a temporary boutique in Los Angeles designed to look like a high-end fashion store. Then, they invited influencers, celebrities, stylists, and people who made their living judging fashion to the launch. Inside the store were carefully displayed luxury shoes, with price tags ranging from $200 to $600. Guests walked around praising the designs and saying the shoes looked like something from high-fashion runways. But those shoes weren't luxury footwear. They were normal Payless shoes taken directly from regular stores and originally priced between $20 and $40. Payless filmed the entire thing and then revealed the truth. The influencers had just praised discount shoes as luxury fashion. The video went viral. Millions of people watched it, and it seemed like a marketing win. But the stunt accidentally exposed something far more important. It proved that Payless didn't have a product problem. They had a branding problem. When people believed the shoes were luxury, they loved them. When people believed they were cheap, they ignored them. The product didn't change, only the perception of value changed. This is one of the most powerful forces in business: branding. Companies like Apple don't just sell phones, they sell social status. Luxury clothing brands don't just sell clothing, they sell identity. Payless spent decades telling customers their shoes were cheap, and eventually, customers believed them too deeply and too permanently. The company had trained customers to see them as crappy, cheap shoes, and once that perception is locked in, it's incredibly difficult to escape. Even if the quality is good and the design improves, the branding becomes a cage. And Payless couldn't break out. In 2019, just 2 years after its first bankruptcy, Payless filed again. This time, the situation was worse. The company announced it would close all US stores. Over 2,000 locations shut forever. Thousands of employees lost their jobs, and an entire retail giant vanished from American malls. International operations survived in some markets, but the brand that once owned discount footwear in the United States was gone. A company that once sold hundreds of millions of shoes a year collapsed in less than a decade. And the strangest part is that their most viral marketing campaign had already explained exactly why. The Paylessy experiment wasn't just a marketing stunt. It was a business lesson. People don't buy products the way companies think they do. They don't just buy functionality. They don't just buy because of the price. They buy meaning and identity. They buy perceived value. The exact same shoe can feel cheap or luxurious depending entirely on the story a company has built behind it. Payless spent decades telling the world they were the cheapest option, and eventually, that message became impossible to undo. By the time they realized perception mattered more than price, it was too late. Stories like this happen constantly in business. Massive companies that seem unstoppable suddenly collapse because of hidden strategic mistakes, and the warning signs are often there years before the downfall. If you want to see more breakdowns of famous business failures, shocking marketing mistakes, and the real stories behind companies that lost everything, make sure you subscribe to Cost of Success. Because the most valuable lessons in business don't come from companies that succeeded. They come from the ones that didn't.